everyone, it's Monica, and today I'm going to be going through all of the books that I've read in the month of April. April was a very busy month because I was participating in the Owl's Magical Readathon, I low-key participated in the stay-home reading rush, and I also participated in a challenge created by two Portuguese booktubers. I'm going to be leaving their links down below for you guys. So they are called Manganette and Felipe Books, and they created this challenge in which you had to apply and then you would get sorted into one of the teams, in either Manga's team or Felipe's team. I was team Lipa, and basically you had to read as much pages as you could during the last 2 weeks of April, and the team with the most pages read would win the game. The thing is, each day you needed to tick out a challenge out of a box, and the challenges could be great for reading, like read at least 60 pages, or it could be like read nothing today. So that was a challenge, and it was a little bit hard for me because some days I want to read a lot and some days I just want to chill and I don't want to read at all. So it was very awkward to mold my days to fulfill the challenges, but my team won, so it's all good. So yeah, April was very fun and I read a lot of great books, so let's get into those. So the first book that I read in April was Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book follows a point in a girl's life in which she needs to decide if she's going home earlier with her friends or if she's staying longer at this bar and she's maybe going home with her high school boyfriend. I really liked that she had a few chapters before that point in which you get to know a little bit of the main character, so you get to think at that point if that is a good decision or not for yourself, and you get to decide that. I really like that. And obviously because you're following two different life paths, I definitely had a favorite and I was so excited the whole book. This book kept me on the edge of my seat because I was so excited to know how it all was going to play out. I was just so curious the entire time, and I have to say, no spoilers, but the ending made me mad. I thought at the second to last chapter and I was like about to turn the page and I was so excited. I was like, oh my god, final chapter, and then I turned the page. That was the acknowledgements. In the end, I ended up giving Maybe in Another Life 4.75 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Crab with the Golden Claws by Hergé. This is the 9th book in the Tintin series, and I have to say they're a little bit nostalgic for me, but I can't really tell you what happened in this particular book because they all feel exactly the same. There's bad guys, they're normally selling drugs or they stole something and Tintin goes after them, and in the end, after exactly 62 pages, everything turns out right. Yeah, I like these books, but I don't exactly love them. They all look exactly the same. But because I love some of the characters that haven't appeared in the series yet, I hope it gets a little bit better as those characters appear. But for now, they're just good books, they're fine, and I normally give them 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Arthur and the Forbidden City by Besson. This is the second book in the Arthur and the Mini-Moi series, and they're middle grade, they're very fun, very predictable. The premise is quite simple, but they're fun to read. And I actually like this one a little bit better than the first one, which is great. But yeah, basically this story follows this 10-year-old boy named Arthur, and he lives with his grandma. His grandfather disappeared 4 years ago, and they are trying to take their house away, and he knows that there's a treasure hidden somewhere in the garden. And then one day, this all happens in the first book, and then one day he finds out how to enter the land of the Mini-Moi, which are these little tiny creatures that live in their garden in hopes that they know where this treasure is. In this book, he is already there with the Mini-Mois, so you get to see a little more of this tiny world, which is very fun. So it was cute. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Power of Five by Elisabetta. Gnone, I don't really know. I think she's Italian. This book is the first book of the Witch series, which I was obsessed with when I was a kid, and it was so sweet. It was actually very fun to read. I was a little bit scared of going into it and not liking it that much, but it totally survived the test of time. It's so cute. So basically, if you don't know, this book follows these 5 friends, and they discover along this book that they have some powers, and it's very weird, like, how the hell am I controlling this? So basically they discover their powers in this book. And at the end of the book, they discover that they are guardians to this city. You get to know that right at the beginning because it's in the first scene, but they get to find that out at the end of the book. So basically they are guardians to this city wall that is tumbling. I don't know yet exactly more than that because it's the first book and I don't really remember that part of the story. But yeah, I think it was very, very cute, and I definitely recommend, if you liked this series when you were a kid, give it a try now because it's still very, very fun. And I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy. This book follows the perspective of Noah when he's 13 and the perspective of Jude when she's 16. And they are twin brothers, and at Noah's perspective, they're super close, they do everything together, they're so understanding of each other. And then in Jude's perspective, 3 years later, they're barely talking, their relationship is horrible. So basically, along the book, you get to understand what happens and you get to see how they are going to overcome all of that. This book was so good. The writing was amazing. It took me a little while to get into it, but overall the writing was just absolutely gorgeous. The characters are genius, and if you are looking for a hard-hitting contemporary, this is probably the top of my list right now. It's just so good, and I have to say, this cover, it's great. The original cover, it's gorgeous, but I don't think it represents the book well. I don't think this has nothing to do with the book whatsoever. The book gives me like sea vibes, like imagine a beach at nighttime with the moon and some stars. That's the vibe this book gives me. So not exactly the sun, although the title is amazing and it has a reason behind it, so it's gorgeous. But the cover itself, it doesn't make much sense to me. It's so happy, and I don't think this book is happy at all. But it's not exactly sad at the same time, but it's not this happy-go-lucky contemporary. And I thought I was going to read like some fluffy romance when I picked this up, but that's not it. So the cover can be a little bit misleading, but yeah, I totally recommend this one, and I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Fielder. Again, this cover does nothing for the book, in my opinion. I actually feel like this cover could be the cover for I'll Give You the Sun and it would fit better. This book is a little bit hard for me to describe because I didn't exactly enjoy it. So basically this book follows the life of this boy, and his brother died when he was little. I don't even remember what age he was when his brother died, but basically you see him grow up with that lost, and it's very, very powerful, I will say that, but for some reason it was not for me. It's very, very dark. All I could think about when I read this book was like a grey cloud over my head, and it was so depressing. So it may be very, very good for people that like that kind of story because it has a very good representation, in my opinion, of mental illness, but it's a little bit too much for me. I think me telling you what exactly is a mental illness that he has is a little bit of a spoiler because it's a very slow read, so you get to discover a lot of things as you read them. That's all I can say. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I would still recommend it because, again, it has very good representation and the story is very, very strong. It was just a little bit too strong for me. Next up, I read Mensagem by Fernando Pessoa. This is a Portuguese poetry collection written by one of the most important writers of our country. I studied it a lot when I was in high school, so a lot of these poems I almost know by heart. So yeah, it was very fun to read, and at the ending there's appendixes in which it's talked about what he originally wrote and what he scribbled next to the poems and stuff like that. It's very, very interesting, and this was such a short read, so it was perfect for the readathon, and I had a lot of fun, and I would probably read this like once a year or something because I just like it so much. I highly recommend if you're Portuguese or if you speak Portuguese. It's great, it's amazing. And I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was probably my favorite of the month, and that was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Brontë. Okay, so normally when I read classics, I listen to the audiobook at the same time that I physically read the book, which I did, and it was very, very helpful. But I normally just go to Cliff Notes or something and read like the synopsis of each chapter after I read them because it helps me out. Especially with Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, I definitely needed to do that because I didn't understand anything. But with this one, I couldn't find any good summaries of each chapter, and I actually didn't need to. It's written in such a classical, but at the same time, easy way that you actually don't need this. I think this is one of the easiest classics to read, especially for beginners, which I still consider myself a beginner. So I definitely recommend the book for that alone, if you love classics. But this book was so revolutionary for the time it came out, just thinking about it. There's a synopsis in the back. I think it's a complete spoiler because the synopsis tells you what happens like this far or this far into the book, like almost halfway through, and I think that's ridiculous. This weird woman moves in town with her kid and everybody in the town thinks she's very, very weird. She's very mysterious. She doesn't let anyone in, so everybody just starts hating her and gossiping about her. But this guy, though, starts falling in love with her. So he tries to find out what happened, who she is, why she's like that. And the reason she's like that is... This was the 19th century. The fact that this book was written in this way at that time... I don't know if Anne Brontë is not my favorite Brontë sister now, just because of this. It was so good. If you love classics, especially the Brontë classics, definitely read this one. It's one of my favorites. So in case you haven't figured that out yet, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Also, it's a chunk, but I just couldn't put it down, which is saying something. My next read was Muse of Nightmares by Laini, the second book in the Strange the Dreamer duology. I can't really give you a synopsis for this book because it's the second one in a series, but basically it's about this city in this magical world called Weep, and it's about this librarian that is obsessed with this city, and one day he has the opportunity to go along a journey to go try and find the city because no one in the world has went there for ages and came back alive. This book was kind of a roller coaster because at first, in the first like 150 pages, I thought it was so weird. It felt like nothing was going on. It was such a slow pace in terms of the plot comparing to the first book. So it was very, very different in that part, which I thought it was very weird. The series as a whole, the pacing is very weird because it's very fast and then it's very slow and then it's very fast. It's a little bit weird. And especially in the beginning of this book, it read so much like a contemporary because basically these kids were just falling in love and discovering their bodies and stuff. But yeah, it was cute anyway because I love these characters. And once things actually start happening, it was amazing. The story overall is so well thought out. It's so well done, so I ended up really loving it. So yeah, even if you felt a little bit meh about Strange the Dreamer, I would still recommend reading the second one because of the way it all ties up together in the end. I think it's very well done and I think it's worth the read. I ended up giving this one 4.75 out of 5 stars. Second to last, we have North Korea Journal by Michael Palin. This is a non-fiction book about his trip to North Korea. He was there to finish like a documentary on how it's like living there and stuff like that. And I read a lot of reviews on Goodreads of people complaining that this book doesn't exactly show a lot of what it's like in North Korea. And I think it's not supposed to. If you want to know that much, you should watch the documentary that they did during this trip. I haven't watched it yet, but that was the point of the documentary. This journal is basically a journal that he kept every day. He was there for 15 days. So it's just that. It's just the little notes that he took along the way during those 15 days. So you need to read that for what it is. You definitely shouldn't go in this expecting a lot of detail because you're not going to get that. You're going to get some glimpses of things here and there, but that's all. And I really love how this book is constructed. It has a lot of images, so it gets you visuals for the things that it's talking about, so you're not completely lost every time it talks about some topic. So I ended up really liking it, and I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read in the month of April was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I can't give you a synopsis for this book. First of all, you probably already know what this is about, and second of all, this book is 74 pages long, so everything happens super fast. I have to say, I already knew the story because everybody knows the story and I was spoiled a couple years ago, but I didn't really like it. the book in general, not the story, but the book in general, I didn't like it because it was so quick that you don't get to explore anything. You don't get to explore the characters, you don't get to explore this experiment. As you can see from the cover, it has like chemical equipment on the cover. I'm a chemist, so I care about those things, and you get none of that basically. Especially in the ending. I felt like this book ended at like 2/3 of this story. We needed to know the real ending. I don't even understand exactly what happened in the ending. And at first I thought that was because I just don't like short stories at all. Which I don't. I don't get to fall in love with the characters and stuff, so short stories are definitely not for me. But I don't think that's it, because after this story there's another story in here by the same author. It's called The Bottle Imp. It's even shorter. And that story was great. I really loved it. I would probably give that story 4 out of 5 stars. I'm very sorry about this because I really wanted to like it, but I ended up giving this one a 2 out of 5 stars. So that was it. That was all the books that I read in April. I was 1 book short of finishing all my 12 owls. But my 12th book was just a very, very slow read. I will talk about it, hopefully, in my May wrap-up. But yeah, I ended up having so much fun this month. And I also found 2 more all-time favorites to add to my list. So that's always great. Please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you feel like it. And please check out my social media. I will leave everything down below for you guys. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!